The next item is if you could all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if Madam Clerk could call the roll, please.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Here.
Alderman Bushy?
Here.
Alderman Meyer?
Here.
Alderman Hansher?
Here.
Alderman Garrow?
Here.
Alderman Schneider?
Here.
Alderman Nurbin?
Here.
Mayor Worth?
Here, we have a quorum. Our first item of business is an appointment to fill the District 6 aldermanic vacancy. The appointment of Brian Schneider was recommended by the Committee of the Whole on October 22nd, 2019.
Parrish.
What did I say?
Brian Parrish.
I apologize. I greatly apologize. Brian Parrish. I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to approve the appointment?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It was unanimous. Clerk, if you could ask Mr. Parrish to step forward. I'll ask him. Sorry about that, Brian. That was unintentional.
I, Brian Parrish, having been appointed to the office of Alderman District 6, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin. I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Welcome. Have a seat.
Yes.
Oh, you got to sign in.
Right. Great. Excited.
Hey, do you guys want to get a picture with your dad up here?
Yeah, come do that.
The next item of business, and welcome. The next item of business is a public hearing on ordinance 2019-1556. It's an ordinance adopting the annual budget, appropriating funds for the year 2020 and levying for the same. This was recommended to the Common Council by the Appropriations Committee on October 3, 2019. This is a first reading. We have a motion to go into public hearing.
Move to go into public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody here tonight wishing to speak to the council about the 2020 budget? Hearing none, can we close the public hearing?
Move to close public hearing.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This was a first reading, but as has been our practice, we typically move to suspend the rules. On that, we will have a meeting later this month to approve it because it needs to be approved in November so that so tax bills can come up. So do we have a motion to suspend the rules?
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and take up ordinance 2019-1556.
We have a motion and a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor of suspending the rules, say aye.
Aye.
Now, the rules are suspended. I assume that was a motion to suspend the rules in order to take it up.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve the 2020 budget?
Move approval.
Second.
Any comments, suggestions, amendments, anything else? Alderman Strelchak.
What I would like to add in, there was a fee that was discussed at the Appropriations Committee, or a cost for maintaining the medians at the civic campus, and I forgot exactly what that dollar amount was.
It was 5,000.
It's $5,000. So I would like to add that into the budget, and I would like to pull that out of general funds to make sure that that can get taken
You mean the fund balance?
fund balance. Yeah.
So there's a motion to add $5,000 to do maintenance of the medians on Cedarburg Road in the Civic Campus, to add $5,000 from the budget and reduce that from the fund balance. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? So first, we'll vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the budget or if there's any other amendments. So if you could call the roll on the amendment, please.
Alderman Strelchak,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy.
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nerb.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Your first vote is on lawn maintenance. So the budget, do we have a motion? We have a motion, so we'll now vote on the budget as amended unless anybody else has comments or additional amendments or suggestions. Hearing none, if you could call the roll on the budget as amended.
Alderman Bushy.
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nerb.
Aye.
Did you call Alderman
Aye.
Strelchak?
Alderman Strelchak.
You can forgive me, I'll still vote.
He said aye. So the ayes have it. We've passed the budget for next year.
Great.
The next item on the agenda is personal appearances and public comment. This is only for items that are not on the agenda tonight. We afford 5 minutes for anyone who wishes to speak on any item that's not on the agenda. Is there anybody here who wishes to step forward and speak on something not on the agenda? Seeing none, the next item is officials' reports. I have two simple things. One, I'd simply like to, yesterday was Veterans Day. I know that Alderman Meyer is a veteran. I don't know who else in the audience, but I'd like to at least recognize veterans and thank them for their service publicly on behalf of the city. The next item on the agenda is a proclamation. This is I believe my predecessor, who is in the audience, gave the same proclamation each year. I've done a few proclamations, but not everyone is read at the council, but this is one that's important to our business community. So the city of Mequon, Wisconsin celebrates its local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. The Mequon business community is largely comprised of small retail and office businesses. Small local businesses boost our local economy, create jobs, and add to the richness and vibrancy of our community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.7 million small businesses in the United States, representing 99.7% of all businesses with employees. Small businesses employ 47.3% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. 94% of consumers in the United States value the contributions small businesses make in their community. Small Business Saturday has helped small businesses since it was first observed in 2010. 96% of consumers who plan to shop on Small Business Saturday said the day inspires them to go to small independently owned retailers or restaurants that they've not been to before or would not have otherwise tried. 92% of companies plan promotions on Small Business Saturday said the day helps their businesses stand out during the busy holiday shopping season. And 59% of small business owners said Small Business Saturday contributes significantly to their holiday sales each year. Private and public organizations across the country endorse the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Accordingly, I, John Worth, Mayor of Mequon, Wisconsin, proclaim November 30th, 2019 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of Mequon to patronize small businesses on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. I'd ask the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce to come and receive our Mr. City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just two quick items. As noted in one of the recent weekly bulletins coming out of City Hall, the city is currently recruiting for election inspectors for the 2020 election year, including the presidential election. To qualify, election inspectors must be a U.S. citizen, a resident of Ozaukee County, at least 18 years of age, and not otherwise disqualified from voting. Applications are available on the city website or in the city clerk's office here at City Hall. This is a paid position and training is provided. And lastly, the city's Winter Wonderland Festival will be taking place on Sunday, December 8th, between the hours of 3 and 5:30 p.m., directly in front of Mequon City Hall. Santa will be arriving by horse-drawn carriage at 3:30. There will be wagon rides, children activities, food trucks, and hot cocoa available for all. Again, Sunday, December 8th, from 3 to 5:30 here in Mequon.
Thank you. Next item of business is a short Appropriations Committee meeting. If the item is to approve the Appropriations Committee workshop meeting minutes of September 17th, September 24, and October 3. We have a motion to approve the minute.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
That's approved. The next item is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is the Common Council minutes of October 15, the Architectural Board minutes of September 23, the Board of Police and Fire Commission minutes of September 10 and October 1, the Economic Development Board minutes of September 24, the Festivals Committee minutes of September 16, the Finance Personnel Committee minutes of September 10, Fire Department reports for August and September of 2019, the Bike and Pedestrian Way Commission minutes of September 5, the Joint Review Board minutes of August 23, the Mequon Municipal Utility Commission minutes of August 13th, the Milwaukee River Advisory Committee minutes of May 28th and August 6th, Planning Commission minutes of September 9, the Planning Commission Policy Subcommittee minutes of September 23, the Public Safety
(26 lots in a residential setting. We have taken a look at a number of different options. What you will see tonight is what we are proposing to move forward with relative to PUD institutional zoning for our site and some B2 use. There is the opportunity for single-family housing on there also, which we're showing that if we were to proceed with that, it would be 42 single-family lots at roughly an $18 million assessed value at full valuation. The PUD B2 use, if we get through the process that we're proposing to you tonight and in the future, it would assess somewhere between $65 and $70 million in full valuation. Patrick?
We will start with a kind of general overview of some of the main bullet points we would like to highlight. Prior to the presentation, we sent out a very detailed packet, and we don't intend to recap all the matters, but this is just a quick bullet point summary. Essentially, in Mequon's prior approval processes, the neighboring land uses essentially have been identified and approved. That has essentially created a bit of an infill parcel. The 40 acres sits in between existing uses. We've gone out and we have essentially listened to the market, and we have since essentially planting a sign out front. We've gotten a great deal of phone calls. Paul, if you want to summarize any of the preliminary outreach.
Yeah, I mean, we really weren't sure going into this what direction we were going to take, and so we wanted to listen to the market and what we thought that the market would tell us that the needs were or the users potentially were. And of all the phone calls that I received, about 90% of them, which you'll see here in a minute, were commercial related, people that had an interest in that. About 10% were on the residential side. So we started to talk to everybody, and quickly discounted some of the uses that I personally didn't want to see on this site in Mequon as a resident and caring for our community. And that were things like gas stations, convenience stores, some of those things that I didn't feel were really best suited for that particular site. So those were the type of calls that we did field.
To date, we've also engaged TADDY, Traffic Analysis Design. They've done a measure of the existing traffic conditions in the environment and then modeled our future condition and suggested essentially both on-site and off-site road improvements related to the project. We have worked with staff and we have essentially committed to a build and contribute model, which we would essentially provide the financing for those improvements and then contribute the roads for essentially a public purpose. One of the important key points here is that with that build and contribute model, we will not plan on asking for any city participation or TIF for those improvements. We have also gone out and engaged an environmental scientist to do a wetland delineation report. Less than 5% of the site were essentially deemed to be wetlands. They were largely isolated of lower quality, but we are planning to protect the higher quality pockets. Essentially, a quick recap of the utilities in the district. There is public sewer along Highland. It is currently undersized to meet the future proposed needs as envisioned. We did engage a Sigma engineering firm to study a venture to share the Columbia St. Mary's lift station, and we do have a understanding with them. Their private lift station would support, it's currently approximately used at about 30% of its present capacity, and we have vetted out and verified that it does have the excess capacity to help service this, and we do have, again, a letter of understanding documenting that venture. In terms of the public sewer, we have worked with staff and your engineering department. Up till now, they've basically indicated that they are waiting for Common Council direction in terms of future uses, as well as the future concepts that may come forward with the East Growth Corridor, along with the subcommittee work related to that planning. One of the early questions we may have is, I guess, Mayor, would you like us to ask questions now, or would you rather us present the entire presentation?
No, it's really a presentation and then,
Okay.
please.
We will come back
And-
to the...
and, some of the things like, I'm not going to tell you what to say, but nuts and bolts like the fact that you engage somebody to look at sewer and water, I think it's the use that you want to use is probably the 10,000 foot view is maybe more important than some of the nuts and bolts stuff. That the planning commission will and staff will work through with you.
Appreciate that.
Since we have somewhat limited time.
You bet. Again, we will be proposing the highest best use in our analysis, and we'll do kind of a comparative of commercial versus residential. Let's go to the next slide.
That's just a pointer.
So again, subject parcel, Oreo Lane School, Ascension Columbia St. Mary's to the north. To the east, we have the Gulf, Newcastle, Concordia's vacant land, and Concordia, 43, Highland, Northport, Washington, Highland House, and a residential subdivision. Our preliminary overview indicates that approximately 80 to 85% of the surrounding land uses are institutional with higher intensity uses. Next slide. This is just a quick, we did fly a drone over the district to document kind of the scale. It's an interesting perspective. This is actually the northern limit of the subject property. This is Columbia St. Mary's. You can see the hospital structure, the helipad, and some intensive parking along essentially the property boundary. Jumping across 43 to Concordia, again, institutional use. It's a very Essentially, it's neat to see the lakefront aspect there. Jumping then, looking northwest, you can see Newcastle, and this is the subject parcel, again, in the Gulf. This is the subject parcel looking to the east. So again, you can see Northport, Highland, and the parking area here. Part of the high-level proposed vision, we've worked with staff to help identify what type of zoning layers may be appropriate. We felt that a PUD overlay over an institutional district on the western half, and then on the eastern half, we were proposing towards this corner, essentially a B2 district. What you can see there is outlined kind of a list of what we envision to be permitted and non-permitted uses. I won't read the list, but you can identify what we see as meeting the vision and kind of the level of quality, the types of uses we feel that are appropriate for the neighborhood. And then underneath them, we are listing those that we feel we don't have an interest in permitting. And that's been kind of discussed in prior iterations with staff. Again, essentially 70% of the land would approximately fall into that institutional district. This would be a public road, and then this would be a B2 district here. Again, next slide. This, again, restates what we envision as being permitted, non-permitted. One of the, why don't I refer to Paul here in terms of some of the statistics?
As we looked at the recent survey that was just completed, we did notice that the senior housing was supported basically or neutral by 76% of the respondents versus 24% were opposed. Senior housing is a very significant part of our proposed development with a very good quality operator that already is in the Mequon area and has a great reputation. We also noted in the recent survey that was completed that about 75% of the uses that we are proposing were also viewed with favor towards the respondents. So we feel that we've aligned ourselves very well with what the East Growth Corridor Plan has outlined, as well as the recent survey.
This is a conceptual master plan of the 40-acre lot. Again, if you look at the, again, the prior slide where we outlined the institutional to the east, I'm going to start at the very top building labeled A. Highlight that here. What we have drawn there is a conceptual site plan that would accommodate an assisted living memory care with the license of a CBRF RCAC. That would essentially be a stormwater management pond here. This is a conservation area that we intend to preserve, and there's a ditch line here that would also feed into that area. This would serve the entire development. Each site would also have essentially some green infrastructure to help slow down the rate of feeding to that system. I'm going to travel to the south here. The next building, B, is envisioned to be a medical office building. And again, moving directly south, that is envisioned to be some form of a office building. Traveling to the south again, we've rendered a hotel. Moving again to the west, we have a childcare facility. And this would be the largest use, which would be an independent senior community that would be age restricted. So again, both this use and this use would be age restricted senior. And again, just highlighting quickly, this is the proposed new public road. We'd have a small boulevard at both entry points on Highland and Northport. This is a conceptual right in, right out that is being considered but not required. It would essentially have what they term a parking triangle or a pork chop, which forces the traffic to move right in, right out. We can go through essentially some of the names that have been associated with each of the uses. For the independent senior, we've been working with United Financial Group. For the assisted living memory care, we're working with Matter Development. For the medical office building, we are working with Ascension and a group called Mequon Medical that would own the structure. This childcare is Ozaki Daycare. The important reason why we're naming some of these end users is that we actually have commitments from groups that essentially have market data that supports the demand and need for those facilities at this location. The two buildings that are not essentially possibly associated with end users yet, but we have had interest, would be that office and also the hotel. And to the, if you go back just briefly. Again, this data table here outlines the amount of acreage allocated to the various uses.
I'd also like to just point out that about 56% of the area is green space. So if you take a look down in the lower left, the neighborhood park, that is part of our development, but is being proposed by UFG as a park for their residents and possibly others. But we are very sensitive to the more rural aspect of the design. So therefore, with 56% of green space, we feel we've done thus far a very good job laying it out and trying to minimize any of the impervious surfaces or the building surfaces.
Next slide. This is that building A from the prior site plan. Rendered in front of you is a conceptual image. That would be the memory care to the left.
Keep it within the next 4 or 5 minutes.
Yep.
We're already at 15. So
Sure. And essentially, the taller structure would be the assisted living portion of the building. But you can see the type of intent of architecture, how it meets the district surroundings. Next slide. This is an early conceptual rendering of the Ascension Medical Office Building. Essentially, it'd be one story. We would have essentially some changing in the roof lines. We have kind of a stacked entryway there. They have already come back to us expressing the intent to increase the variation in presentation color and vary the roof line. Next slide. This is the conceptual renderings for United Financial Group. Essentially, you can see a 3-story structure. If you look at slide 1, 3-story structure there, and then it would possibly step up to a 4-story structure on the northern building. So you can see essentially how they would treat that approach. The front entryway is the rendered section here, which would be number 3, which shoots that front vestibule. And again, these are initial conceptual renderings that show intent. Next slide. Some of the items that we wish to discuss and gather feedback on would be essentially the market has approached. These are not just pictures on a board. These are real groups that we feel have high quality and relate well to the surrounding uses. And we're asking, I guess, Common Council for feedback on conceptual timeline. We do have, like I said, those 2 to 3 users that are committed. The one that would like to move first would be the medical office building. They would ideally have they have a signed lease that they would like to be occupying that building by next November. And I guess part of those questions are if you feel that the zoning is headed in the right direction, it would essentially set the table for our application and moving forward with our additional technical studies to submit here towards the end of the year.
We've also just listed some of the things that have been completed to date, so you can see we are progressing quickly and diligently with our plans. And in conclusion, we just basically, again, thank you, the committee, for taking a look at this preliminarily. We wanted to also thank the staff who have been working with us diligently through this. We'd like to, I guess, point out that to maintain a good quality of life here in our community, we need a strong tax base, and I think everybody knows that, and you talked earlier about our budget. One of the things that our development will do is create a much stronger tax base with revenues flowing very quickly compared to some of the alternatives that we might have. We just listed three there that over the next 5 years, we feel the city would receive about $750,000 net in contribution from our development. Technical schools would receive about $300,000, and our great school system here would receive $1.6 million in the next 5 years, which I think can go a long way to help continue the growth and development in our community. We also will create through those different entities 200 plus jobs, new jobs to our community that will also have a additional effect on our economy. So we intend to complete this project without asking you for a dime. We don't need your money. We're going to do it on our own. I know a lot of people, developers, come in front of this committee asking for various different mechanisms that can support their development. We do not need that. We just need your support as we move forward to be able to make this reality. So our $65 to $7 million project is a reality, and we hope we can get it off the ground with your support in the near future. So thanks again for the opportunity and the format that you allowed us to present tonight.
Thank you. We do have 3 people who have registered to speak. If anybody else was planning on speaking, if they could pass a sheet up. The first person who's registered to speak, and I will apologize in advance, I'm not 100% certain I can pronounce the name, but Tayaba Sethi, if you could step forward and introduce yourself. And
Hi, good evening. Well, I'm going to start with this. First of all, I found out about this meeting about 2 hours before it started, and I wasn't at all prepared. I rushed over here, and I have to say my head is swimming and my stomach is turning. I am part of the Highland Road community. I will start with this. The mischaracterization by these people of the survey responses is deplorable. We'll just start with that. The Mequon residents overwhelmingly do not want this. The people of the Highland Road community do not want this. I would beg this city to not rezone anything at this point. We do not need more office space. We do not need more storefronts on Highland and Port Road. We have a huge amount of space that is not being used, empty storefronts, empty offices all over this city. And now we need this beautiful brick and mortar, 4 stories, which dwarfs the little ranches right across the street from where their grand boulevard entrance will be. Really? When we look at that northeast corridor of development, everything on there, we look at Concordia, okay, that's an established old, institution. Okay, it's been there, it's anchored. Everything is to the east of Port Road. This is now encroaching on all the residential area that goes to the east of Port Road. It is shameful that this is even a consideration. 4-story structures, including a hotel, would be permitted uses? Really? And then when does that open that up for Highland Road community facing widening of the road again? We're always on the map for that. 4 lanes, my house's entire front yard, I have a farm. My farmhouse will be eaten up, probably except for maybe 20 feet of the front yard, and my home value is gonna go into the toilet. And so will everybody else on Highland Road that is in a similar situation. This is shameful. That is one of the far-reaching consequences that nobody is, of course, gonna bring here at this particular meeting, but that will come, and then we will be here again talking about the freeway interchange that has to happen, because then we will need that facility to accommodate all the traffic that's going to have to come into this beautiful brick and mortar development. As a whole, Ozaukee County has plenty of space to do this kind of development. 8 minutes north is Grafton on Port Road. There's plenty of space in Grafton, and they seem to love this kind of development. People didn't move to Mequon to have more of Brookfield. $40 acres, this is? 40 acres is sufficient to put a hotel, restaurants, financial facilities? Really, is it? I don't think so. I have a 10-acre property. I
Please,
can't
please.
imagine.
The concept is to direct the comments to the council, if you would.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't imagine on my 10-acre farm putting 1/4 of this kind of development onto that 10-acre parcel. I mean, it's just crowding it in for the sake of lining somebody's pockets. This is about development. This is about a developer can never pass a green space without lighting up at the fact that we could turn it into brick and mortar and line pockets and exploit that land. When do we stop the insanity? We're talking about tax base. I mean, it's laughable. We're sold this bill of goods that there's going to be in a 5-year span, we're going to come up with, less than $2.5 million of tax revenue from all this. Really? That's worth? It's a pittance over a 5-year period. Let's break that down annually. It's nothing. I'll pay a couple more dollars on my taxes. I think most people in the community would, to spare this rape of the land. It was just an organic farm a couple years ago, farm to table. Highland House was serving their vegetables that were growing on this land, and now we're going to do this? This should not be rezoned. Just want to say also, your letter F on one of the slides says it fits the synergy of surrounding neighborhood and linkages. Where? Where does it fit that synergy? I'm looking at little ranch-style homes. There's a hospital. Okay, there's a hospital over there. Well, hospital is something a community needs. That's why it was approved. That's why the community didn't go up in arms. But no, it doesn't fit the synergy of anything in that Highland Road community. I am sad. I am sick. I have goosebumps right now, and I'm ready to cry that this could happen to my community. I'd like to know where these developers were. We have Patrick Shanahan, who is an owner's rep. Where is the owner based? I doubt that it's local. Don't come into my community and start building 4-story buildings. Please, 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 council members. Don't let this happen.
Thank you. The next person registered to speak is Dan Abendroth.
Hi, Dan Abendroth, West Shoreland Drive. Nice to see you all again. Couple points. The results of the recent public community survey regarding land use in the East Growth area identified only 3 land use categories that were supported by a majority of the residents. Now, they want you to believe that people that were neutral are supporters. If they were supporters, they would have checked the support box and they'd be listed in the support column. They're not supporters. Only 3 land uses were supported: parks and open space, single-family residential, and interestingly enough, academic facilities. This proposal contains none of those land uses. And what it does contain is neither creative, unique, desirable, or appropriate for this neighborhood. The only exception might be the daycare, which would fit into a nice single-family subdivision. You should also consider the city's 2035 land use plan. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your land use plan. In that land use plan, this property is identified as single-family residential. People depend on these plans. So please, adhere to the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final person that's registered to speak is Mary Macari on Forest Cart. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Sorry.
That's okay. If it were Irish, it would be McHare.
Okay.
You know, normally I look at this as an opportunity as a citizen.
Can you pull the microphone closer, please?
Oh, okay.
Dan's taller than you are.
Okay. I look at this as an opportunity as a citizen to be involved in the participation of shaping and development of land. And doing so in a way that's environmentally and fiscally sound without having negative impacts on current residents or on our budgets. I looked at the list of what's being proposed, the 355 senior apartments, an assisted living facility, a hotel, a child care center, a medical office building, a financial office building. Now, this land, as the previous gentleman said, was originally set for low density of, single-family units. So what would you have? Maybe on 40 acres, if you had 1 acre per household, at the most 4 kids. These days, I think the average is 3. You do the multiplication, 120 people? With the number of buildings and facilities they're planning, you're going to have at least 1,000 people on 40 acres of land. Imagine that. We have, as I said, weak sewer development. Think of this. 600 people flushing their toilets at the same time. And those of you who lived here when we had problems with having to discharge things into either the river or holding land, the areas, holding ponds, it wasn't pleasant. But we had a lot of flooding now that we didn't have before because of nothing that anybody caused, but we have climate issues now. There's a lot more flooding. And even though they say they're not wetlands, it's still ground that's absorbing water. So if we put that many facilities, we have to be cognizant of the fact that nothing works in isolation. It will affect everything around it. So it will have negative effect. And by the way, I'm looking at that development team and I'm saying, get the neighbors. Everyone's saying this is working in synergy with the neighborhood, but I don't see the neighborhood on that development team. And as a member of the infamous Park Freeway Demapping Committee, we got the neighbors on that team. And if you've been down there, you can see what's there now, and it's wonderful. But it works for that neighborhood. Now, the other thing I'm looking at is that hotel. You've got a grade school not too far away. You've got a college. You have neighbors with little kids. Do you want transient population? A lot of what you're asking for are things that are going to require more police force, and that is something that will impact our taxes. You add 1,000 people or more on a daily basis, someone has to pay for that infrastructure. And when you say we looked and it's saying that we want senior housing, what is the price point? Did someone say at what price point do you want to pay for senior housing? Because that's a killer right there. I looked at some of those apartments and I'm thinking, the new ones that are being built, my thought as a business owner, I want an asset for that kind of money that I'd be putting away every month. I don't want it down the tubes. There are a lot of things there, and there are a lot of answers that are not in these papers we've seen. And I think we need to look at that before we make decisions. I want to see the actual questions that were asked and the way the survey was asked. Who was asked? What were the actual answers? Were price points given? There's a lot of things. I don't know what happens if there aren't a lot of people that fill those places up and they're empty. Who are they going to rent to? Because they're not going to want them to go empty. It's going to impact the community either positively or negatively. And right now, I see a lot of questions and a lot of potential negatives. And I do have all my points if you would like a copy, because I would love to get the answers. Sure.
Well, just to be clear, this is only a preliminary discussion, and even if the council would be gung-ho about it, there's a lot of time where a lot of questions will be answered. But I think there's three things that I'm hoping we'll get out of the council tonight. One is, are these uses something, the what? Are these uses something Mequon generally wants? Number two, is this the right location? And three, is this the right when? We're in the process of doing a Port Washington Road corridor study. We're simply right now looking at East Growth, but we're gonna do that in connection with the rest of Port Washington Road. And should the city be making this decision now before that's done or later? So those are kind of the three questions, the what, the where, and the when, that I'm hoping will give some direction both to staff and to the developer about. So who wants to start? Alderman Garrell.
Well, I'm the alderman of this district, and I live very close to this development, and I want to look at it from another point of view. Businesses look at what needs are. They look at the community, look at what needs are. What do we need? They risk millions of dollars and do a lot of homework before they make that decision. This land has sat vacant for years and years and years, as long as I've lived in Mequon, the last 20 years and long before that. They did ask the market what we need. I do believe we need a senior care living facility. I know we need another senior. We need something similar to a Newcastle. We have an aging population in Mequon. They're getting older every day, and we're much higher than the national average. My father wanted to move into Newcastle. They didn't have room, and they didn't have an age-related facility. He had Alzheimer's. He had to go to Wausau. So when the family came to visit him in Wausau, we needed a place to stay. We had to find a hotel. Newcastle, when people come to visit their aging parents, they need a hotel to stay at. And at this location, that's what the hotel primarily, I believe, would be used for. They're not asking for money from the residents. They're not asking for TIFs at all. I looked at the neighborhood park. I think was a nice location for a neighborhood park, 2 acres in the back. That's the only spot that's directly across from the residence. I talked to the lady in the farmhouse who lives right next door. She has no problems with it. When I walked the district, the people, I didn't hear anybody that had problems with it, and really until today. Somebody sent out an email to a number of people, and I got 3 calls at home and quietly listen. I said, I'm gonna listen tonight, look at what they're recommending, or look what they're doing, and lean toward a decision, or at least lean toward what I think. 56% green space is a lot of space in any development.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm not done yet.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, didn't mean to cut
The
you off.
the 4-story buildings, I'm not all that happy with, but if you look where they're located way in the back, far enough away so they're not going to be quite that intrusive. We absolutely need a medical office. What essentially is just moving across the street. When the interchange comes in, we voted for that. Dan Abendroth was the mayor at the time when we voted for that interchange to come in. Scott Walker spent the money on the zoo interchange and ran out of funds. Now Tony Evers approved it again. So we may get an interchange there. We have 4 of those aging elderly. They have the golf course across the street. That's what my father wanted to play on, but he couldn't. We do need, and the medical facilities are right close to the hospital there. They have a way to have sewer and water. They looked at that. There are a number of other things to look at other than, not in my backyard. And I know that I'm going to offend some people, but my job is, as an alderman, is to look at it and listen to what the people say and then see if it makes sense. And I think it's well thought out. and my fellow aldermen are gonna have their viewpoints, but being right there in the neighborhood, and I looked at the 2035 land use plan, with an interchange, this is gonna change that area. It's gonna change that area. You have a business across the street, you have Newcastle on another corner, you have the hospital, and there's a section right in the middle of that where, yes, it borders the lady's farmhouse on the west. She doesn't have a concern with it, and they're putting a 2-acre park across from the other people, and most of those houses back up to that. They don't face they don't face Highland Road, they back up to Highland Road. So there are some positives. This is not a negative, not well thought out idea. These businessmen put some thought into it, and they're risking their own money, and I respect that.
Alderman Meyer.
First of all, I want to thank you for trying to reach out for me a number of times, and it's not by your effort that we didn't get together. It was on mine, but I do appreciate the outreach from you. A couple of numbers that you had from our survey. I was one of the architects of the survey, so there was a little bit misrepresented. What actually came across on the survey was the fact that in senior housing, it was based on and some of this, when you took a look at some of the graph, it was based on, 0 was opposition to it, 1 was neutral, and 2 was in favor of it. And so when it came to senior housing on it, it was just a little bit above neutral. And it wasn't overwhelmingly 75%, just a little bit above neutral inside of it. But what was glaring was the fact that when it got to be apartments, 9 units or more, there wasn't a single automatic district that was even close to being neutral on it. They were all against having more apartments. And this is adding another 300 to 350 apartments that we just got done approving hundreds of our other apartments here inside of this area. I just can't see us approving more apartments when we just got done doing all that. Memory care facility, yeah, we may need to have one. I'm not sure about the size of that and that for it. But the main focus, what I've been hearing from realtors, is the fact of stock for building homes in Mequon. That's the most important thing that we need. We don't have enough of that for it. And while your concept of it may say that it's not an appropriate area for single-family homes, quite a few years ago, and I've said this a couple of times, we have had, it came up on Mequon and Wauwatosa Road, and in the Concord, now eventually there's a Concord development inside there, and those are some gorgeous, beautiful homes that are inside there, and people said they'll never get built, and there should be apartments, there should be businesses, should be office buildings inside there, because nobody's going to live on the corner of Mequon and Wauwatosa Road. So we have that stepped up with condominiums first, and then homes in the back. Gorgeous homes, nice families that live inside of there. They're across the street from a car dealership, they're everything. So saying that it's not a single family homes would not be appropriate inside of that area, I think that it can be doable inside of that area for it. Is it the best? Can we make the most amount of money out of it, or can you make the most amount of money out of it, and can we get the most in taxes out of it? Probably not. What you're building is probably going to get you guys a lot more money. It's going to give us more money inside of our coffers. But is that what we really want to do for that area? Is that what we really want to impose on the residents inside there? Some of your concepts inside of there for, a bank on the corner of the daycare, I think is a good idea for it over there. I just can't support 300 to 350 more apartments inside of that area with 4-story building inside of it for it. I know that's kind of short compared to what the hospital is, by a story and a half or whatever, but putting that inside of that area over there, I think it's just the wrong time, for it, and the wrong place for it. I mean, I like the idea, I like the concept. I don't like the height of those buildings. I've always been a 2-story building. I know that's not the most profitable thing to build when you're doing apartments. But that's my take on it, and I appreciate all the work and effort that you've gone inside of it. And to, Alderman Girl's comment on the fact that, you've done your due diligence and the market says that, and, you're willing to put all your money behind that, but that just doesn't mean it should be built, and I appreciate all the effort and everything for it, but with that type of development, that type of size of apartments and that, I just could not support it at this time. Unfortunately, I just can't.
Anyone else? Alderman Parrish.
Yes, thank you to the applicants and all the citizens for attending tonight. I've had the privilege to be on the subcommittee that the mayor created for the last 4 or 5 months. In many ways, this agenda item it's a little early, given everything we're doing. For example, on November 21st, there's a neighborhood meeting that is going to specifically look at land use, ranging from Highland Road to Pioneer. We're looking at everything. We're looking at utilities, land use, incentives, this, that. So when I look at this proposal and read it, in many respects, this assumes that we are bringing the utilities into that corner and starting the process. We have not.
No, they actually have them there, just to be clear. To be fair, there are that's the one parcel that has utilities already.
It's at the road. And I read, per Mr. Driscoll's comments.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'll be quiet.
Sure, it would be an extra $4 to $7.8 million. I don't think I misread that. Kim, can you correct me on that? If we choose specifically this area A from Highland in this parcel,
This parcel has the ability to connect to public sewer and public water, and it is within the sewer service boundary. So it is a little distinct from the rest of the corridor, but there is some additional infrastructure, of course,
thank you,
needed.
bless you. So anyways, we're looking at these utility uses that will stretch down the road. It has the potential just for the short run of it to be up to $7.8 million for the sewer, and then $1 million for the water. So even if it's at this site, this is the first site, and this is the last remaining site, as far as I know, in the service area. And we are looking at expanding that per the subcommittee. You said you did a traffic study. I just wanted to know how many vehicles you were estimating, or is that not ready yet?
We could get you the traffic study. It's quite extensive.
Okay. Well, here's the concern. Currently, there's 13,700 cars per day. As soon as it gets to 20,000, the recommendation comes in to double the lanes. So we really have to be conscious here of the use, and is that use going to trigger the road expansion? And by the way, the city made an agreement not to ask the county for funds for cost sharing. So this is on us. So let's just look at the trips, and maybe it's kind of phasing in the development so that we don't trigger any sort of road expansion. Plus you have the Highland Road interchange, which is going to create a ton of vehicles. As far as uses go, I'm struggling with the hotel concept. I've talked to a number of residents who are very much in favor of the restaurant and possibly more restaurants. I'm really struggling with the density of the apartments. So it's not that I'm opposed to the senior apartments, not regular apartments. So I'm not opposed to the use. I'm very much opposed to the density. And so I would hope that if you were to come back, maybe it wouldn't be half as dense, for example. As far as senior goes, we're really lacking in continuum of care as far as a use goes, and I can't think of a better site being next to a hospital where you have that full range of continuum of care so that you can age in place. And so while I recognize the need to account for every square inch of this site, I just wonder if maybe you could ease into it more. Maybe there's other higher and better uses that can come forward over time. As far as, I'm finishing up here, is little details, no ingress or egress near the intersection. If we do this, there's got to be a major buffer along Highland Road, so no headlights or any traffic going into that residential subdivision. And then just looking at the pictures, the architecture feels somewhat inconsistent between the medical building and then the apartments in the back. It's really a hodgepodge of architecture. So I don't believe that would get through the Planning Commission. They'll be right on top of that. So those are my comments, and I'm looking forward to hearing my other people.
Alderman Boucher.
First, thank you for bringing this to us. I'll bring the mic closer. Thank you for bringing this to us at this point rather than a year from now, although I'm not sure at the end if this is more beneficial. But Glad to have the opportunity for input. Looking at some of the comments regarding survey information, one thing I note regarding the senior aspect is that with a city of approximately, I believe, 24,000, census data shows that we're around 24% of 65 years or older. And while I know, given the weather of late, that a lot of people would prefer to go to Florida at this point, but I think a lot of people would like to stay in Mequon. So out of that 24,000, I'm sure many would like to stay in the city survey. Again, numbers are something that one can easily misconstrue and take and use in different ways. I'm looking straight at the numbers where, with the question of senior-only housing and full-service retirement to communities, if you look at the oppose and support and take out the neutral numbers, it's like 23% to 39% opposed and 39% in favor. And if you use a similar type of look at the numbers.
Pull it a little closer, Glenn. I'm having trouble hearing. I'm guessing the people in the back of the audience
sorry.
can't hear. And speak up.
If you look at the numbers, again, with the senior living and the survey results, it's showing about 24% opposed and about 39% supporting the senior and full senior retirement. And then when you look at the individual categories that were mentioned as for use, and again, taking out the neutral and just looking at opposed and support, you find definitely, as mentioned, huge support for academic facilities. But then there's also for hospitality, which included lodging, restaurant, and entertainment. Professional or medical office was next. And then also health and personal care showed as being highly supported, in addition to the comments mentioned of open space being one of the main items in support. So I think, you need to look at the numbers, what people have said, and you can, just looking at support versus opposed, that there are many uses that can actually be used here, that the city was comfortable anywhere within the east corridor. And obviously there's constraints going on because the sewer doesn't go north of Columbia St. Mary's Hospital. And so that's a limitation as to some of the usages that I know people would like to have further north and maybe spread out, but that's not something that we're gonna foresee in many, many years. And just as confirmation, if this were to build out at, just say, a value of $50 million, what does that mean for the city numbers that have been mentioned back and forth on an annual basis?
They'd be reduced by a third.
No, I mean, so tax revenues, if it was 50 million, just what does that come out to?
What's her rate? 360? Roughly 370? Yeah. 320?
You're looking at 70, 75?
On an annual basis. Okay, thanks.
Oh, you looking for me? I think you're going to end up with it's $3.20 per thousand. So, if you got 50 million, that's 500. Something like 350, somewhere over $200,000 a year.
Just wanted to make sure.
Somewhere
that was
around
clarified
150 to
as what the
$200,000 a
amount
year.
is.
Alderman Strelchak.
I just wanted to thank the applicant or the developer for coming forward and just even presenting the opportunity to the city. A lot of times we're in a role here where we say what we like and we don't like, and I just want to make sure that the flavor of the city at least shows our appreciation for you at least bringing this opportunity to the table. Whether it fits Mequon or not, is open for discussion, obviously. There are certain things that I like about this development. Again, just sharing a little bit of the background here. I was on council when the I-43 interchange was approved. Mayor Abendroth and I talked about that, and we said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this corner to go with a very high and intense use. The property value probably just quadrupled, if not more. And I think based on the land value, the size of this development is also increased. We also discussed that, we do have an exit to the north, which is Highway C. That's kind of the access to the north side of Mequon and Cedarburg. Then we have Mequon Road, which is our retail and the entryway to our business district. And then, the initial vision and discussion, just again with him, was that this would be more of a softer entrance. It would feel like you're entering in more of a rural Mequon. The plan that came forward, in my opinion, doesn't really fit that thought or vision that we had discussed years ago. Again, we're not the only two making decisions for the city. As Alderman Parrish has stated that, we're in the process of looking at land use. I'll mirror what the mayor and Alderman Parrish have both said. I think we're just a little premature on this. The land use has been going to committee. We've done a diligent job in reviewing this, knowing that this would be a need in the future. And where I know some of your projects are looking to come forward sooner than later, and to have a sense of what the opportunities are moving forward, I just don't know that the city's in the position to offer a decision at this point as to what we support and what we don't. It's just kind of a guess. The site is currently zoned R1 with ag overlay. Is that R1B with ag overlay? Indicating to everyone that bought land around it, everyone that lived in the subdivision to the south of it, that this would be a residential development. Again, people aren't fools. They know it's on a corner. They know that there's going to be some retail component or some business component on the corner. But they were anticipating that there'd be some land ownership in this district. As I shared with the development team when we met, in advance, just to, tell me a little bit about what's coming through the pipe so we weren't, surprised when we got to this meeting. I really wanted to see some skin in the game in this, where we have density at 355 apartments, and I'll call them apartments. You can call them senior housing, but they're rental units. They're just rental units for an age class that you can legally market to, and they're still, quite frankly, they're just, it's another term and label for apartment buildings. There's not skin in the game, there's not ownership, there's not pride in living there to the extent that, it's your property and you're gonna care for it and do things like that. And, by building this, now we need to have a hotel next door for people to stay in. I feel that the use is a little too intense. I don't like switching the R1B with ag overlay to institutional. I think it opens the city to tax concerns. Now, where we have an excellent group of United Financial that wants to develop, I'm familiar with several of their other properties. They have one here in Mequon, and they've done an exceptional job. They care for their property, they treat their residents well, and they have a Class A product. Again, where I want to support them and that type of business coming in and spending more money in Mequon, I feel that the use of 350 apartments, 4 stories, is just a little too much for here. In the meeting, I did say, funny you said age in place. There's a huge trend for, in-home aging, and even more specifically, patient in-home aging. If you had properties that were condo of sorts, I would be open to entertaining a little higher density. Again, you could go 2 stories, maybe some 3 in spots-ish if you were looking to, put amenities in those spaces and things like that. But you have an opportunity here. You're right next to the hospital. You're right by a freeway interchange. You can do one of the most innovative things in the marketplace. You get national write-up, Business Journal write-up, everything else on providing a patient in-home aging with custom in-home monitoring, the smart home technologies out there. Again, this investment really isn't going to come in a rental facility, but it would come in a property where people can live. People want the age of our residents that are in their homes. They're there because they don't want to move. They don't want to move out of their homes. They like the space. They like Mequon. They like the rural character. There's really no value in spending the same amount of money to go to half the space and live somewhere else. Yeah, it might be new, but again, it's an apartment and they're making a compromise. Their family has to stay at a hotel versus a guest bedroom, things like that. Going over just kind of to summarize this so that I'm not on mic too long, things I do like, I absolutely love the 56% green space percentage that you're bringing forward. I think it's great. I like the fact that there's a park that's near the road that gives you a little bit of a buffer. I think Ozaki Daycare, this is a great spot for them. You know, coming in, going out, it's a perfect drop-off. It's a perfect pickup place for kids. They run a quality daycare. They're at the end of Liebau Road. You know, they've kind of been down there in a rented space for years. I know they moved at least once. And I'd really like to see them flourish in the community. Good for you partnering with them. They're great. I like the use of Ascension. The architecture was horrible. More than just the roof line, I'd really like to see some rural character of a business building on this corner. I think south on Port Road, you know, we've got our, you know, McGlass buildings and, you know, the other square buildings that are just really kind of industrial and feel, I just don't want to feel industrial coming into this exit from what I'm going to be leaning towards, currently sitting on Planning Commission, but also as a council member that will be voting on this if it does come forward with a recommendation. The road pattern is nice. I like the boulevarded road pattern. I'd really prefer to see that spur end at Maple Crest so that you got an in and an out at the same place. I think that the additional entrance that you kind of showed maybe going into the proposed hotel, right in, right out is going to provide for confusion and cause accidents, and I think it's going to be a challenging intersection with people stopping in more than one spot just trying to get to the intersection. What I do dislike, or as I mentioned before, the overly intense use, 355 plus apartments, is just too much for the area. I mean, Mrs. Setty's a resident in my district. If I don't listen to her, I'm not doing her justice. That's why I'm elected to office, is to listen to that. The majority of my district is right, spills into Highland. And, you know, where I don't think the traffic's gonna really hit in as deep, I don't think they want to enter their community and see something as big at that space. They never envisioned it. I don't think the city ever envisioned it. So I'm struggling to, you know, back behind it. Fire and Rescue currently is struggling with staffing. We threw an extra budget dollar amount towards them this year to try to help half fix the problem that we know we need to finish fixing next year, and where your highest and best use is an excellent opportunity to gain more funds. It also puts more burden on the fire and rescue, and it requires even more staffing in that type of a location. So until that problem gets fixed, I'm going to struggle with that massive of a senior living facility or apartment complex designed for people that might need those calls and services on a more frequent basis. The hotel's just an out for me, as I mentioned in our meeting. It's too small. If we did a hotel in Mequon, I'd prefer to see a boutique hotel similar to Iron Horse, where you have a feature of some kind of dining, some high-end feel. Again, I'm not looking for you know, a one-night stay. I know we need it. I agree with Alderman Girl. You know, as people come into town, we've had people stay up at the Budgetel, and my grandparents were in Newcastle. But I just don't think that hotel of that type fits right there in the city. You know, again, in the lack of ownership within the community. If you're going to go forward with architecture, I would look closely at how Newcastle is. Newcastle's got a very high and rich look, where I feel that the quality and the architecture of the senior living component came forward. I feel, I even showed my wife, and my wife's like, well, that looks dated. That's like an 80s apartment. That's one personal opinion. Again, we're not trying to get an art show up here, but I would really look at to some high quality, some natural stone, and just really kind of tying into that rural character as you're looking to build any facility within there. I haven't been overly positive, but I hopefully haven't been overly critical as well. I mean, I support you guys in coming forward with something. I really, wish you success, but, we got to make sure this fits. We got to make sure it fits the character. We want to see you get value out of your property, but we got to not do it at the expense of changing our building standard for the city.
Alderman Urban.
I'll try and keep it brief to the what, where, and when. So the what, I think there's a big difference in the survey results between senior living and just general apartments, where I think very worn out on general apartment use. I think the data is a little different. For senior apartments, I do agree maybe the density is a little dense, you know, where there's 3 and 4 story buildings now, if it was 2 or 3, it might be a much different story. The type of use in the proximity to the hospital, I think makes a ton of sense for most of the proposed uses, the senior living, the assisted living, certainly the medical office, which I agree the architecture could be a little better, but it's a concept plan. You spend a little more money on that when you get a temperature for how it's going. I think where we're a little less sure on the when part is some of the more commercial aspects, which is a major focus of the study that's upcoming, for the Planning Commission Subcommittee. So perhaps have a more open mind on that. Attend the meeting next week. I think it's the 21st. Is that correct? With regard to I-43 interchange, there should be no mistake. It's going to happen whether this happens or not. If the project gets built, it's part of the project. It's in. This will have no bearing on whether that gets built or not. What that is likely to do, though, is vastly change the traffic profile on Port Washington Road. In fact, it probably will take a lot of traffic off of it. All the traffic going to Concordia will probably mostly come in on the freeway now. So did Taddy model that in? That's a question, I guess. Did Taddy model the impact of having the interchange there? Because the traffic numbers are vastly different with and without that interchange. Without it, this just only adds, but I think it's a much less clear picture. And I guess the traffic professionals would know better than I would. Was that part of their analysis?
At the time of the study, I don't think the interchange was known, so we would go back and model that variation.
Can we all talk in the mics?
I
Yeah.
would argue that it's been well known for at least 2 or 3 months now that the project's back on, and since it's on, the interchange is part of the project. That's 6-year-old info, so it's on. I would recommend going back and.
Can you pull the mics forward, please? Keep talking.
We're not sure if it was or wasn't. Okay. We'll get the committee all of the study Yeah, it would- information. Staff does have it, but. It's we'll have to- not clear what would happen with traffic with point. that built. Crazy as it sounds, there could possibly be a net reduction in some roads with all that going onto the freeway. So in general, commercial uses are a little less clear given the study. I think there's a general consensus, a little less density would be nice. The type of use, though, I think, given the fact it's surrounded by institutional, you could make a strong case that this isn't a bad fit. But there's a long road to hoe here.
Oops, they were done. Alderman Hancher.
Good evening. I'm open to the idea. I see some value in it, and I know that for a fact when Newcastle proposed their buildings, there was the same kind of concern. This is too big, too dense, and now that it's been built and it's been there for a while, people are comfortable with the idea. The other thing that I have favorable is that we do need senior housing. There's definitely a need for that. And it's not just people living here, but also people living here and bringing their parents from other places to live here also. There's a need for that too, I've seen. The other thing, the aspect that I look at this is a unique opportunity for intergenerational experiences. You have a daycare, you have senior living, and you have a school. So as I look at it in that situation, I can see where there could be some benefits where people living in the community helping out at the daycare or at the school where there's a benefit to that. So I don't believe that all of it is bad. The only thing that I have is about the hotel. I don't know what. I guess I would need more information about how that would look and how would that relate to the other buildings. But I'm open to the idea. I know that development, and I think it fits with the hospital, and definitely as people age, they want to be close to where their doctor is, and also medical help. And so I do see, I'm open to the idea, so.
Alderman Schneider.
On one hand, I can certainly see that the land use around this site has a lot of institutional use. And I can see that it might be difficult to have single-family homes up abutting the hospital, for instance, because there is a lot of activity there in terms of, not helicopters for one, but just traffic in general in a parking lot. And there is some synergy that I can see with a medical office building close to the, some of these uses I think fit appropriately to that area. I don't think I'm alone though in thinking that this seems overly dense, both in, with regard to the bulkiness of the project, if you want to just look at it from a visual standpoint. I also wanted to raise a concern that a community member raised to me, which is how, do you have any idea of the price points of these? Because I think that people that are downsizing wish to downsize in terms of their expenditures as well. And I understand that you're trying to build a product that has some amenities. So one of my questions is, what is the, at least ball point, you know, of the price point here, ballpark figure? And my other question is, in these senior housing developments, is there anything different that you add because it's senior housing, or is it basically just the fitness area like you would have in any other apartment building? Or are there some amenities in the non-memory care, non-assisted living that makes this more appealing to an elder?
Are we allowed to add?
Sure.
Brian? Sure. Brian's with United Financial Group, one of the owners.
Hi.
Good evening, and thank you.
Pull it close, please, Brian.
Sure, and thank you for your time. With regard to pricing, we would project this to be about 10 to 15% higher than our existing Highlands at Riverwalk in the community. So ballpark for a one-bedroom, and this is early in the process, but I would say in the 1,300 to 1,400 range. And then we go all the way up to a two-bedroom, two-bath with great room, which typically caters to our residents that are moving out of a single-family home. Those square footages will be between about 1,250 and 1,450 square feet, and the higher end of those would be in the 2,200 to 2,300 per month range. And with regard to your questions on design, there are a lot of intricacies associated with this. First off, you'll see the buildings, there is logic why these are contiguous buildings. You'll notice even with, for example, the Spur 16 that was recently built, those can function very well in discrete buildings. And you can see that also has an isolated amenity package. What we've discovered over time, and you can actually look at our other communities, we operate 12 other communities in the state. We evolved over time from doing smaller buildings into larger contiguous buildings because we found that our residents were much less likely to use the amenities if they're in a discrete building because they don't want to walk there during the winter months. So the larger building, I understand people can get scared of the massing or the density of that, but that's really a function of the specifics of this use so that our residents can walk inside the building to those amenity packages. With regard to the specific amenities, Mequon's quite special in that it actually has a non-age restricted community with an indoor pool. That's actually a big paradigm shift for us by including an indoor pool. If you look at all surveys between market rate properties and senior properties, the top two amenities are always an exercise facility and a pool. Typically at the non-age restricted, the exercise facility is number one. In the age restricted, the pool is number one. And given the climate in Wisconsin, an outdoor pool, basically at a market rate facility, it's a social arena. Whereas our property, it's really trying to cater to the next generation of baby boomer renters that are really focusing on wellness and an ability to age in place in a good way to continue being healthy and maintaining their movement. And I want to make sure everybody does understand that the Highlands product here, being age restricted with no higher levels of care, they are very active residents. They are going to provide value to the community. They will provide opportunities for businesses while traveling at off-peak hours. But also it is works in synergy with the other development that's being proposed as well as Newcastle, because a lot of the time we'll have couples that move into our development and one member of the couple will age at a different rate, they may need to go to a higher level of care, and the other resident might not want to live that lifestyle. So by being adjacent to a hospital and being adjacent to these continuum of care products, it allows couples to remain in close proximity to each other while living in ways that are conducive to their specific levels of health and mobility. And also to answer your question, Alder Strelchek, coincidentally, you made a comment that part of these uses might result in the need for a hotel. I think you had some great comments for the hotel in other ways, but actually, we do have a lot of guests that come and visit our residents, specifically around the holiday times. So one of the amenities that we do that is specific to the 55 plus is we have guest suites. And this type of development would have 2 guest suites, and we found that incentivizes the family members to come visit. And we also find that the best type of family is the one that goes away at the end of the night. So it's good for everybody. So that's kind of what differentiates our product with non-age restricted, but also it's the activities and the lifestyle that we provide at our communities. And we'll have a lot of different programming that caters to give our residents things to do. And those are types of activities are evolving significantly over time. So in this facility, you'll see that we also, in addition to the fitness area with commercial grade equipment, we would also have a fitness on demand room, and that has a virtual trainer, and that allows our residents to take courses such as yoga, Pilates, things of that nature. And those are all connected with the indoor pool and the other amenities to really serve as a heart for this development to allow social interaction that really helps our residents have a high quality of life.
Alderman Garrow.
I'll be real quick, and I'll keep the mic right here. So, both my parents spent 8 years before they died, and they both moved into assisted living facilities. This isn't I don't like to categorize this as apartment rentals because it's really a lot. It's different at age related. I know that for a fact. These people aren't transients. These people aren't 21-year-olds out on drinking sprees. They're people who are getting toward the end of their lives, and they like to enjoy it. And this is probably the place they may just stay the rest of their life. Both my parents left in boxes when they left. I feel bad about that. The other thing, that was the one point I wanted to make, and the other thing I wanted to say is Alderman Urban made a real great point when he talked about the traffic on Port Washington Road. Same is going to happen on Lakeshore. When this interchange comes in, a lot of those Concordia students aren't going to take Lakeshore, and they're not going to take Port Washington. They're going to come right off. They're going to go right over to the east. They're going to take some traffic off of that. And when you look at, there's really nothing to the west on Highland to pull traffic in that direction. I believe they're going to come off that freeway, and they're going to go to the missing links, or they're going to go to the Highland House, or they're going to go to the facilities there, and they're going to get right back on the freeway and go out. So I don't think you're going to have any fear of having to, that traffic's going to go west. Where are they going to go west on Highland? There's no other facilities out there, and I don't plan there's going to be. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of traffic on Highland. I think it's this idea of the interchange is just going to pull traffic away from other areas and onto the freeway.
Alderman Meyer.
I'm gonna make just one quick thing and say that, I'm not opposed to as much of the assisted living concept over there for it. What I am a little bit, not confused about, but a little disappointed about everybody kind of using the phrase as senior housing when it's 55 and older for it, because basically, and as was pointed out by one of the other aldermen, the trend now is for people to stay inside of their homes. And one of the older subdivisions that I live in, most of the people are starting to transition out of their homes when they're in their 70s, and in their early 80s is when they're transitioning out. This is institutional and used just the legal term as 55 and older, and you can use the term as senior to say that when it actually, the process is you probably will not have a lot of that type of age bracket inside of that. In the apartments there, a lot more in the assisted living area, and that's why the majority of people end up moving out of their homes, is because of that. So, like I said before, I'm not really opposed to the assisted living concept inside of there. It's the massiveness of the apartments that are behind that. And I just think on 40 acres, that's just really large for that.
And just to clarify.
And we
oh,
see,
sorry.
we see it all the time instead of some areas where somebody said we got 50% green space. On 40 acres, with the size of the buildings and that, it's not gonna look like a lot of green space inside of it. And that's just the reality of it when you have it.
And you're perfectly correct in your age levels with your assessment. It is by law 55 plus. That's just a function of the 1986 Tax Act. But we found that our average age of entrance is right around the early 70s, tends to be around 72. And with the previous generation, the silent generation, a lot of the times they moved because they could no longer do home maintenance. What we're finding with the baby boomer generation is that there is a bit of a change, that they're actually making a lifestyle change because they no longer want to do the maintenance. But the other thing that we're finding is that the average age, while they enter about 72, they'll age in place, and our average age is about 80. Whereas in an assisted living or continuum care facility, that typically tends to be around an average of 90. So that's some of the differences.
Just a quick question for you now that we got you up here. Thanks. Would, in the 55 plus, would it be 100% 55 plus where you'd have at least one resident in each unit that would be 55 plus, or are you going to do a percentage where you can be legally categorized as 55 plus?
I believe the law is technically you can have about 5% less than age 55. We basically have in our policies that it is 55 plus, and really it's never been an issue because I'll be honest, the average age upon entrance does tend to be in the lower 70s.
Okay, and then just the one other point that I just don't want to fail to make is as we're entertaining the use of this property, we got to keep in mind that it's right next door to Oriole Lane. Child safety is such a big national issue right now. Child safety is a local issue, and we as leaders here just have to make sure that we talk with you guys as developers and just make sure that whatever use goes there really protects those children. The back of the property backs up to the back corner of Oriole Lane School. I would just want to make sure that everything is being done to make sure that it's safe. I'm more comfortable with you being there with your use backing up against the school than something institutional where you could have a child predator or somebody that would create an unsafe situation. But again, I wanted to make sure that that was clearly noted here as we're talking about the use of the property.
Anybody else, or I'll give my 2 cents. When I ran, I was not knowing about this project. I still was pretty clear about what I thought about Port Washington Road, and I'm not going to change that position. When I go through the 3 questions, the what, the where, and the when, the what, I like all of your uses. I mean, there's some building issues, there's some, I think that every single use fits into Mequon. I agree, you did your homework. Those are uses that may be appropriate in Mequon. The question is the when, the where, and the when. And I think if zoning means anything, and people have accused me of being too pro-development, I did vote for Newcastle. I think Newcastle, at the time I thought it was gonna be a great addition to Mequon, and it has been. But it's the where. And if we don't take a bigger look and instead we zone things based on somebody having a good idea for a particular property, rather than looking at what it does to the whole of, not just what's around it, but the whole of the corridor, then we might as well throw out our zoning code altogether and just kind of look at, do we like the idea? Part of zoning, if you're gonna approve lots of things, you also ought to be clear about what you're not gonna approve or where you're not gonna approve. The city has always had a policy that basically commercial, retail stopped at, I forget the name of the road, Glen Oaks, and business stopped at Highland. Now, there's a hospital, sure, but that's a different use, and so to the extent we're going to change that, it shouldn't be because we've made a decision for one particular property. It should be that we've made a decision for the community and the feel and the overall, but also the economics for the whole corridor. there are, I believe, but maybe I'll be proven wrong, other locations on the Port Washington Road corridor that fit every single one of these uses. And the question is, and we should encourage that, but the question is, how far do we want to stretch? What is the Port Washington Road Business District? How much do we want to discourage the redevelopment of existing poorly utilized sites further south by simply saying, we'll let them go up in a green space further north? And the other issue that we ought to be cognizant of, if you talk to any of our business owners, you talk to any of our building owners, what is the thing that will drive the success of their business? And that's residential development, not more business development. And the question is, where do you put more single-family residential in Mequon? We've got some infill sites. Some people oppose those. Small, 2 or 3 homes getting put places. But this is and I've talked to 2 or 3 developers who've done a lot of work in Mequon and had a couple of them that don't do work in Mequon but come and look at the parcel. And they believe that this is the best parcel in the sewer service district for residential development that's left in Mequon. Now, yes, there are some challenges, but there were challenges when people redid Concord Creek, as Dale mentioned. There was challenges with Haddonstone, which is right backed up to the expressway, is closer to the expressway than this, and is one of our nice subdivisions in Mequon. The question should be not just do we want the uses, and not just would this be an okay site, but what does it do to the economics of the corridor? Because that's the reason you have zoning in the first place, to try to have harmonious uses, to try to have a prosperous commercial area. And so that leads me to the when. I clearly am never going to sign an ordinance that supports this until at least the study is done. It's not going to happen under no circumstance. Because I think that is, and I promised that when I ran for office. I wouldn't. In fact, 6 years ago, I think it was 6 years, 5 years ago, when we talked about the East Growth area, I was pretty insistent that I thought this should be residential then. So, yes, can my mind be changed? Sure. But that's after looking at the corridor as a whole, not after looking at one parcel, because one person has an investment in that parcel, and it would be a good way to realize the investment. Now, I agree with Mark that these guys did their homework. They know what would sell. And I agree with Glenn that you shouldn't throw the neutrals on either side. You should look at the positives and the negatives. So I'm in favor of the what, but the question is the where. And the when is only going to be after we look at the corridor as a whole. So I will also tell you, it takes 6 votes to get this approved, because I won't sign it until we've done the corridor. And I've passed that message on fairly clearly to the developer in a meeting a few months ago. I want the process to move forward, the study, but the study isn't just on, what's the date? And I do want to point out the date. November 21st, people who are interested in what's happening on North Port Washington Road should come to the open house we're having to give input. But it's not just then. And it's not just there'll be a process where we give input and where the Economic Development Board and the Planning Commission gives input. But I don't think we're going to rezone anything until we've looked at the corridor as a whole. Because we're a community of 24,000 people. Yes, there are good uses, but there's a limit to how much commercial, non-residential growth we will ever have based on the population we have. And we need to make a decision, where do we want that non-residential development to be? And so that we have the strongest, best. I've rejected in the past where somebody said, well, I don't like this parcel, but I think it'd be better if you, that's just kind of spot zoning, and usually a deflection of not wanting to have the zoning the project. And so you say, go somewhere else, because they can't. this, I think we need to make sure that we're in favor of the zoning for the area. And I've also supported some rezonings, but that's one form of commercial to, B3 to B4, or here I would support this going to R3 or R4. I don't think R1B is probably what this ends up being. Maybe I got R3 and R4 mixed up, but going from residential to institutional/commercial, and just looking at this parcel means we haven't done any planning. We simply are being reactive. And you're going to say, well, I've heard people like Mark say, well, did anybody read the study? Well, we have a city plan. Now, changing it on the periphery is one thing. Doing a wholesale rezoning because one applicant happens to be there, I think is short-sighted. I know, I'm familiar with a number of the McMurtry properties or the financial. I think they did a great job on Cedarburg Road. I supported that there. I'm in favor of a hotel in Mequon. I'm in favor of the daycare finding a new building. Medical office is a great use. Of course, there's lots of places you can put medical office in Mequon. And it's not within a walking distance. So they're going to have a van, whether it goes a half a mile or goes, this quarter mile jump, doesn't make a whole lot of difference, to go to the hospital. It's not like people are going to go to the hospital from there, walk over. The question is, where do we want this? What kind of zoning do we want? And I think we can get there. I hope we do it fairly. We move the process along. I hope everybody contributes to the process, but I'm not going to support, I'll support things that are consistent with current zoning or shades off of current zoning. I'm not going to do wholesale rezoning and be in favor of it in this corridor until we've looked at the corridor. So that's where I stand now. The majority of 6 members of the council overrule me. This gets approved. But that's where I'm at, and I really hope we find a good use for this property and a good use for the people who want to build the things that are proposed for this property. And maybe when the process is done, it is this property, but I'm pretty skeptical of it. So that's where I'm at. Anybody else? I don't get the last word necessarily. So that's where I'm coming down on it. Anybody else? I know that's not what you wanted to hear from me tonight. I know you got some good comments from other people. Maybe there's a proposal that can pass, or maybe the process will work out that this is a good location for this. But the when, to me, this isn't it. I made a promise. I debated this issue in the debate. I sent out material saying this. I had it on a website. If I went around and now said, hey, I'll support this, then I'm a big fat hypocrite who should be thrown out of office. And I'm not going to do that. Instead of I'm just a big fat guy. Anyhow, I do thank you. I like a lot of the work that was done, but that's where I'm coming down on this project. And that's not being anti-development or making Mequon a difficult development city. I want to make development go quicker and be easier, but it's got to be consistent with a plan and with zoning or an understanding why we're changing it. So, the next item. Thank you, though.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Resolutions. Resolution 3650. Whoops, I'm sorry. Well, we're back to being the Common Council. I don't know that I need to declare that. I used to think we have to make a motion to do that, but anyhow. Resolution 3655. A resolution awarding a contract for long-term disability insurance and employee assistance program services to MetLife for an annual estimated premium of $28,780. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Oh, I'm sorry, this was recommended by the Finance Personnel Committee this evening unanimously.
Move approval.
And a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? Questions are appropriate. We don't have to spin through everything quickly. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin.
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
The next item, Resolution 3656, a resolution approving the 2020 comp plan for non-represented employees and establishing the position of forestry worker at pay grade 8. The Finance Personnel Committee recommended this unanimously this evening. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Garrow,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin.
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
The next item, Resolution 3659, a resolution designating Hometown Bank of Fond du Lac as a public depository, and I should clarify the title. It's not for the city of Mequon, it's for the certain use described in the memo. If anybody wants a description of that, we can have staff explain that to you.
Ambulance billing, right?
What's that?
Ambulance billing.
Yeah, it's for the ambulance money. That was recommended unanimously by the Finance Personnel Committee this evening.
With some changes.
Oh, yes, please. Do you want to outline them, or shall I?
I wasn't really taking notes at that time, so
Okay.
maybe
What?
you would be better.
Well, since there are my changes, let me get to them. Thank you for reminding me.
It was to clarify a clerical error, above versus
Yeah,
below.
well,
to-
I'll walk through this.
Got them? Okay.
Unless you, do you want to?
I
Go
think
ahead.
I got two of the, I think I got two of the three.
I don't have my finance personnel packet along. Where I wrote it, where I wrote my changes down. Oh, here it is. Is that mine? Oh, I can get it. The first change is in paragraph 4, on,
But that's just Kevin.
oh, the packet pages here. They're not consistent. On packet page
We'll see.
155, it says any one of the persons holding office of the city designated above. It actually can be designated below. In the following paragraph, it names individuals, and while that's done in the incumbency certificate that you give to the bank, we're about to change finance directors. We may change a mayor at some point. We may change a city administrator far from now. But this is effective until it's changed, so we opted to take the names out so that the common council resolution described who can do it. And we also asked staff to add a provision to the resolution, which I can describe, but we didn't actually draft. And the description is that before the payments are made, that the finance director, because this allows LifeQuest to order the payments, that the finance director reviews the payments requested before LifeQuest can actually initiate the payments. Is that consistent with what the committee understood me to?
So move approval with those changes as noted.
We have a motion, is there a
A
second?
second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Alderman Meyer.
Just one question. In paragraph 4, it seems like there's a lot more authority to the bank than just to take in receipts and disperse monies. Is that just a standard?
Well, that's, that the individuals at the beginning, it says, any of the people below can authorize them to do it. So the mayor, city administrator, or the director of finance can tell them to do 1, 2, 3, but it's, the bank then does them.
Okay.
On direction by one of those people.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second, please call the roll.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin.
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy.
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is a resolution appointing Caitlin Krieger to the position of Finance Director / City Treasurer. This was recommended by the Finance Personnel Committee unanimously also.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to nominate anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Is it too late to table? No.
Congratulations. In 6 weeks or so. Or condolences.
Congratulations.
The next item is Resolution 3661, a resolution ratifying three change orders in the amount of $47.74 in connection with completion of the 2019 community survey. And what did public welfare say?
Public welfare, Mayor, public welfare approved Resolution 3661 with reservations pertaining to some of the cost that is incurred inside here. We thought that was incurred by the community survey providers themselves because of the fact of the mailing that we thought was not done correctly, and it was not designated as coming from the city of Mequon. We thought that a lot of that was probably because of the fact of their own cause, but we went and approved it anyways.
Unanimously?
Unanimously.
Is there
So I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second, with similar reservations.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Alderman Schneider.
I had the same thought when I read through this, that there had to be some repeat mailings and some additional paper generated surveys because people weren't able to identify them as the Mequon survey when they arrived. But my other thought was, I don't know how we would tease out the dollar amounts that were related to the problem with the poor mailing. And that's why I think that we're almost obligated to pay this amount, because I don't know that we can determine how much of it was related to the survey operation itself.
Alderman Urban.
I second those thoughts. We did discuss that at committee at some length, and we did encourage staff to make strong recommendations to the provider to change their practices going forward. If we're sending out a community survey, the institution who the survey's for should be noted somehow on the cover of the mailing, so there's some indication who it's coming from and what it's for. Otherwise, it just looks like junk mail. I even threw it out, and I was looking for it, so. And I think I know what's going on in the city.
I threw mine out too.
As did I. No, not really. I just set it aside and then used the online one, but we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Schneider?
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin?
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Aye.
Alderman Bushy?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Garrow?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
That passes. Resolution 3662, a resolution rejecting the bid for repair of the footbridge at the Mequon Public Safety Building. What did Public Works have
We
to say?
unanimously recommended approval of the rejection.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay. So we're
We're not going
We're
to,
voting to reject the bid. And
Exactly.
I vote, just to make it
Say
clear.
yes to say no.
We have a motion and a second. And just for anybody who cares, this will be coming back to us in a different form. Please call the roll.
Alderman Nurbin?
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Aye.
Alderman Bushy?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Garrow?
Aye.
Parrish?
Aye.
Alderman Schneider?
aye.
And that passes. Resolution 3663, this is to award the Range Line Court Water Main Relay and Road Reconstruction Project Design Contract to R.A. Smith of Brookfield, Wisconsin, the amount of $37,800. What did Public Works have to say?
Unanimously in the positive, recommending approval.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Aye.
Alderman Bushy?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Garrow?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
Aye.
Alderman Schneider?
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin?
Aye.
The next, that passes. Resolution 3657 to prioritize areas for influent infiltration reduction, implementation. The Sewer Utility District Commission approved that at our prior meeting. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The final resolution is a resolution approving the 2020 sanitary sewer budget and establishing the 2020 sanitary sewer user fee schedule. The Sewer Utility District Commission also recommended this unanimously. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. This requires a roll call vote. Please call the roll.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin.
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk.
Aye.
We have no specified unfinished business. We have no, that other stuff. We do have two items of new business. One is, it says common council president to appoint. I'm not sure that's exactly accurate. I believe that in fact the council appoints, and just by under ordinance, just by tradition, we've had the president make nominations. But
So what I'll do is I'll make the motion to appoint Alderman Parrish to fill current aldermanic vacancies in Public Safety Committee of the Park and Open Space Board, as well as a position of aldermanic alternate to the city's Economic Development Board.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Busy guy.
You want to hear, do you want to say anything about this?
Look forward to serving.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And congratulations, those are your assignments until April. And finally, we have a motion to appoint Heather Baden as a trustee of the library board. I hope I pronounced Ms. Baden's name correctly. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And only one more item is,
Move to adjourn.
thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.